Are you all ready to join me today in our trip to outer space?
Come along quietly or not.
I will talk to you of art, for there is nothing else. Some artist made a hook. Yes. Let you bite upon it.
Classy. And now, without further ado,
hello, folks. This is Albert Shivers, and welcome to another episode of the Planet Shivers podcast. On this episode, I am joined by Noah Koep Wilson. Noah and I cover all sorts of ground, from Noah's writing to art, what's going on in the world. We cover a lot. Before we get to that, just want to fill you guys in a little bit. My art show at the Gamut Gallery is still going on in Stroudsburg. That show will be up until June 3rd, I believe. And you can see some of my very newest work featuring Marilyn Monroe and my other high contrast ink drawings, pointillism and drip. I'm very excited about this new style I'm developing. Pointillism. Why do I gotta be fancy? It's dots. It's all dots. Also, at the end of this week, April 24th, my art will be featured at the Rubik's Cube album release party near Nazareth. It's going to be a great show. Headed up by the new band Rubik's Cube, led by Vanessa. Also, Nate Marks and his Squirrel Trappers are going to be there, as well as not only other musical acts, but some stand-up comedians. Should be a great show. I'll talk all about it on the next episode. Most importantly, before we get to Noah, I'm very excited to share with you guys that brother of the pod, Isaac Wilson, has put out his new music video. You can go find it on YouTube if you type in Old King Moon. That's the name of the YouTube channel. It's really a phenomenal video. I helped Isaac do a little filming on it, but he did a tremendous job editing. And within the video is from all over the place, all footage that Isaac captured through the years. Not only is the video great, but the music is phenomenal too. And I eventually want to have Isaac come on, talk about the music video and what some of his thoughts were behind it without ruining it. You know, you get too bogged down in picking things apart and the meaning and da-da-da-da-da. You can very easily ruin the art. I think it'll be great to have Isaac talk a little bit about it. It's even better if you go check it out yourself on YouTube. Look up Old King Moon. Right now, his music video is the video there. Click on it, watch it, enjoy it, and share it for Christ's sake. All right, with all that said, I hope you enjoy myself, Isaac, and Noah and our conversation. Catch you on the other side. Oh, and one more thing. I forgot to mention the name of Isaac's new song. The name of the song is Born Under the Grid on YouTube under Old King Moon. I'm sorry, Isaac. I forgot. There's a 24-hour-a-day carnival going on in my head, and sometimes a few people slip past the gate. Anyway, enjoy the conversation. Isaac, Noah, me, go.
When did gum get so soft, you sons of bitches? You know what this country used to chew? Tree bark, glass, shotgun shells, the broken swords of our vanquished enemies. That's why I buy Bazooka Joe gum. It's like chewing a mountain that someone shot a freeze ray into. What's wrong with this country? Huh? When did we lose our way? Detroit, life is hard. Shouldn't everything else be harder?
All right, folks, welcome to the Planet Shivers podcast. And on this episode, first of all, Isaac is back.
Hello.
And our guest today on this episode is local writer and a great mind and a friend, Noah Koep Wilson. Thanks for doing the show, man.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate
Definitely.
it.
No, I've been excited to finally get you on and have good conversation. So I guess we could start off with your writing, if you want to talk a little bit on that and
Sure.
Give folks a little introduction to yourself.
Yeah, sure. Well, I grew up in Upper Black Eddy, Pennsylvania, small town, about 10 miles south of here in Robsville. So yeah, I've spent my whole life here except for college. Did that thing for a bit out near Erie, PA, Edinburgh University. which was a really cool experience to be out there. And that, I guess, all of those things, being a kid, high school, college, people all, affected me as a writer and as a creative person in general, and as a person in general, I suppose. But I guess the first time I really did any writing, I was probably like 12 when I first started out, just messing around. And actually the first thing, oddly enough, that inspired me to write was a TV show, which was Lost. Remember that show?
Yeah.
I used to love that when I was a kid, and I was all about it, and I was like 12 when it started. Something about it, my 12-year-old brain loved it, and I got really into the characters. And after that, I just started, I think I started, I can't remember how far I got into it. It was like a fantasy story. And it was all like character based, and it was all like very, it started in one location, and I was getting to know all these different characters, and just doing that. And it was very, it was very basic, and it was very, maybe a little wild. Like, I don't know. I guess I always had kind of a wild imagination, and maybe I wasn't as, concise and as I should have been in, detailing everything, but it kind of went off the rails, that story. I probably have it somewhere. I can't remember. But it was fun. I think I got, 40 or 50 pages into it. But, that was the first ever thing that I wrote, and then after that, it was I guess throughout school, English class was always the only thing I didn't totally slack off at. It was the only thing I was really interested in. And I wrote, poetry in high school and short stories and got into that.
Right.
And then when I got to college, I was undeclared for a while, and then I finally became an English major. I almost became a psych major because I'm very interested in behavior and people in general and society. But I became an English writing major and did that, and that was really, really cool. Met a lot of great people, and I got really into personal essay writing, like nonfiction, writing about my own experiences and, using that as a way to touch on wider issues. So I'd write about whether it would be something like going for adventure in the woods, an experience I had at camp or something. I went to one kind of camp situation once my dad brought me to. It was was it with the Scouts? I can't remember. The Cub Scouts? I can't remember, but I write about that and write about other experiences that, shaped me, and going to, whatever it was. I sort of got really into writing about just those life experiences. So it was only in recent years, the past couple, and particularly the past year, I've kind of gotten back into poetry more than anything else.
Okay.
Which has been fun. So yeah, that's I kind of, and also I had an interest in screenwriting for a while because I've always loved movies. So that was, but that's kind of on the back burner.
Gotcha. What kind of stuff are you working on, around now?
Well, right now, as I said, I'm focused on the poetry. My plan is to I'm working on one longer poem that's sort of going to be like a mini epic of sorts, I guess you could say. And I'm about 14 pages into it, and my plan is to have some shorter poems sort of published with it if I can.
Okay.
That's a whole other thing, but once I want to get all of these things complete, this one longer poem and then all the several other, a dozen or so other shorter ones that sort of accompany this longer poem. They're kind of thematically related, and I want them, I would like for them all to be one book of complete poems together. That's kind of my goal right now.
Okay.
And that really came into focus even in the past, really especially in the past month or two. Because other than that, I've also been working on a longer project that I know now is going to take a long time. It's sort of a sci-fi fantasy novel.
Okay.
That's a brand new thing. I started it a year and a half ago, I think. And I only have like a chapter and a half written. You know, I've only been working on it sporadically, but that's something that's been on my mind a lot, but it's a long-term project. I realize it's going to take me a long time.
Right.
So, in the meantime, I figure, well, since I've also been vibing with poetry again, I might as well focus on that. I can get that done a little bit faster, you know, maybe make something happen with that in the meantime, get something out there, because, you know, I'm not published as of yet. That's the goal in the next... maybe this year, you know, I'll try to put myself out there and make it happen. But that's a whole other thing than the actual creative process. You know, it's a very different animal. I haven't even begun to tackle that yet.
Right.
So, yeah.
So who are some writers that you are influenced by, or writers that you read like regularly? Who are some favorites?
Well, first of all, in the way of fiction, well, I mean, Tolkien comes to mind.
Okay.
He's always been, like, near and dear to my heart, like so many people. You know, The Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion are, like, kind of my, you know, in my heart forever.
Okay.
So he's the one that, he was probably the first that really got me, like, in love with books, to be honest, in a way that I hadn't been before. Dan Simmons... I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's fantastic.
Okay.
I'm in the middle of finishing his... I'm on book 4 of which is the final book in the Hyperion series. It's like far future Earth science fiction, and it's really incredible. I've been loving it so much. Honestly, it's like the best sci-fi I've ever read. It's so good. I recommend it to everyone. It's just the concepts are really incredible, and the characters are great. So well written. Like, the amount of detail and precision in the world he built in these 4 books is just pretty phenomenal. I think the first book came out in the late 80s, Hyperion. I can't remember exactly what year, and then the 3 preceding books into the 90s, I think. But he's just so good. I've really fallen in love with Dan Simmons, and I know he writes... these are the first things I've read by him, so I'm looking. He's written a lot, mainly in science fiction and horror genres, and I'm looking forward to reading more of his stuff after I finish this. So he's another one. Aldous Huxley I like a lot. Brave New World really inspired me. It's a great book. Carlos Castaneda, I was on a kick for a while as a teenager, and in my early 20s I was really into Castaneda. The bizarre life and bizarre writer, but really inspiring, and for all of his probable weird faults and crazy life, he's a talented, interesting artist. So I really like him a lot. Herman Hesse is another big one, like Siddhartha and Narcissus and Goldmund. I really was affected by when I was a teenager and growing up, and he's great. I started reading another book recently by him called Beneath the Wheel, I think it's... Yeah, I have to finish it. I put it down when I started Hyperion, and unfortunately I forgot about it. I have to finish it. Oh, and another one I have to finish, which I've really been loving, is The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. Okay. It's really good. Really good. I think they made a movie that was semi-inspired by it a few years ago. What was the name of that movie? A Cure for Wellness. Okay. I think is the one, and it's sort of semi-inspired by it. The movie was pretty good, but the book is great. So in the way of fiction, those are the ones that come to mind offhand. I also really like Annie Proulx. She wrote the only thing I've read only a few things by her, but some short stories by her that were really, really inspiring, and some other things. So she's great. And in the way of poets, I've really always been into W.H. Auden a lot. Okay. Rudyard Kipling really inspired me. I don't know, there's been so many. I mean, I like William Blake a lot, Edgar Allan Poe, and Emily Dickinson. All of them I really like a lot. Recently I rediscovered how much I love Maya Angelou. She's pretty fantastic. But I mean, there's so many, and there's, like with any art, you can't really, there's endless amounts that
Yeah.
you can consume, and there's always going to be more. I was thinking about the other day the fact that when you, from an objective point of view, there is a literal amount of art that exists on the planet. There is a finite amount.
Right.
But to each human being, it's endless.
Right.
There's always going to be more.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, like it always, like the new things will always continue to be produced.
Right. And all that was produced exists forever, so
Right.
long as it has been preserved and published. And
Yeah.
of course, there's a lot that's lost to history, I'm sure. But, we're still reading Shakespeare, we're still listening to Mozart,
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
And I think like the computer age really shortened that gap between like the centuries of different art and things coming out. Now it's just all basically in one place for us to find it without having to go through a big search.
Right.
Yeah, mix them together and everything. It's crazy.
Yeah, and people have the ability to put out their own work a little bit more easily. Anybody could start a blog or, or self-publish. That's industry has grown. That's something I've considered as an option. I don't know if I'll pursue that. I know some people who have self-published their books and had some success with it. So that's something that I may look into in the future. But, of course, then the issue becomes, gaining the audience, the reach, not having a publicist to promote your work and, getting out there. It's a whole other thing. I know traditionally, especially in regards to poetry, it's like they say, oh, you should get your foot in the door, publish something in a literary magazine, one piece in a literary magazine or a journal or something, and get your foot in the door and get your name out there. And that makes sense, and I may do that, attempt that, but for this particular project I'm working on now, it feels like it needs to be one thing all published together because it's all related. So.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
So there are so many different ways to come at writing. So many different directions and angles. So like, what do you have like a process, a writing process? And if so, like, would you mind going into it?
Sure, and I think it's interesting because it depends on what form we're talking about.
Okay.
I've noticed that my process changes depending on if I'm working on fiction or a personal essay or a poem. The process is somewhat different. So I noticed that when I'm working on like this science fiction novel I started last year that's going to be the long-term project, when I'm working on that, it's very it's always going, it's been, since the story came to me, it's always going in the back of my brain where the story's going, what's coming down in the future in the story, where we're going to go. It's all like running in my brain as I'm writing, and I'm writing each part, I'm going through, and I tend to be a perfectionist while I'm working on it. I won't move on to a new chapter unless I'm really satisfied with what I've done before, and I kind of edit a lot as I go. So if sometimes it's just I'm in the zone and it's flowing, and you're in a space where it's being translated from wherever it comes from, and you're pretty, I don't want to use the word perfect, but you feel really good about it as it is. And then maybe you reach a point where something just isn't working in one sentence or one word, and it isn't working, and I can't go past it until I get that one word right or that one sentence right. I can't go on and then come back and fix it. I have to fix it in the moment and make it right, or else I can't go forward, because the cadence and the style and the voice all flows together, and I don't want it to be interrupted. I want to maintain that throughout. And not to say that I don't sometimes go back further. I reread a lot what I've written, and maybe I'll tweak some things here and there later on, but in general I like to have it like as it is. I like to really have it perfected. And maybe that'll change. Maybe in the future when I get the thing done and I'll go through a whole new editing process and make sure that it's the way it is. But in general, I edit as I go, and I like to make it as good as it can be before I can move on. But again, like, I know where the story's going to end. I know all the major plot points. It's all in my head. I have several pages of notes. It's all like, because the story itself doesn't stop in my mind. I can't write as fast as my brain goes, you know. So it's all there, and I know where it's going. But comparing that to writing a nonfiction personal essay, for example, and maybe I wouldn't think this, but I've realized that for me, it's true. Writing something that is more of a personal essay, I actually don't know where it's going to end up. It's not all runny in my head the way the fictional story is.
Okay.
Because I'll begin an essay about early childhood memory, for example, and I'll start writing about it, and I don't know where it's going to go or where it's going to take me. I'll recall this memory or this experience, and I'll try to get into how I felt then and what it was like and what it meant to me, and it goes somewhere interesting, and it's sort of out of my control.
Right.
And I may start an essay that I think is going to be about one thing, but it ends up being about something totally different. It takes on a wider context and becomes something universal, perhaps. And I guess that's the goal with essay writing, is to have a personal experience that's very personal and very specific, but it becomes universal by the end of it, because the theme or the meaning of it, or someone can identify with something in it. So I guess that's, I don't know, for me that's just the nature of it. So, but I noticed that difference with fiction and nonfiction, which, when thinking about it now, I would imagine, part of my brain would say, well, the fiction should be the one that's more freewheeling, you don't know where it's going to go. And yet, the fiction is the one where I know exactly where it's going to go. Not to say that it does surprise me, and it's not that I don't know everything. I don't want to say that I know everything about the fictional story going to happen. I know the ending. I know the major plot points. I know the characters.
Right.
It does grow organically as I write it, and new layers are added. And so it's not like this stagnant thing. It does change. But my point is that in general, I know the outline. And in nonfiction, I don't know the outline when I'm talking about my own personal experiences, because I have no idea, because it in and of itself is an exploration of maybe something that I didn't know about or think about, but I'm tapping into it, I'm diving deep into it, I'm remembering, and then seeing how I feel about it, and it may reveal something. So it's more mysterious in a sense.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and that's like the magic of like personal essays or journaling, is that it is this, you're one-on-one with yourself, going through a certain, whether it's that day or a period of your life, and that other things can bubble up to the surface as you're going through one thing, like you say, and then other things start coming up.
Sure. And then with poetry, it's another thing, I think. With poetry, I've found the main thing is just to be... It's more instantaneous and surprising in a lot of senses. I find that I have to just be prepared wherever I am throughout the day. I could be getting breakfast out somewhere, or just hanging out, doing something out on a walk somewhere, and suddenly just words will come from nowhere, and you gotta be ready to capture it in the moment.
Yeah.
That's the thing with poetry especially. And maybe that'll be true to an extent with the book I'm writing, or anything you're writing. You'll think of an idea will come to you at a random time of day, but I find it's more so with poetry. For me, it's more so. It's like it's like a lightning bolt almost, just from somewhere, and if you just gotta be ready to capture it, because it'll fade and disappear. That's what I've experienced too. If I'm not ready, something maybe will come to me and then it's gone.
It's a heartbreaking feeling.
Yeah.
Pretty much the same way with it.
Right.
Just notebooks of little quips, or just like clues almost as to what you were thinking at that moment that can kind of, I don't know. I can kind of apply that to like the fiction thing, you know, the thing I was trying to write. I guess it's kind of the same deal with that.
Sure.
You know, I do find like rereading a bunch of it, it's hard to kind of keep the flow of it going. But it's weird, like say as with like a painting that you're doing or something, or like you're making a song. It's like you could almost sort of, you got the whole thing kind of mapped out. You know, you could like lay the base sort of coat down or the basic figures, whatever. You see where it's going, but with the whole, if it's all like a internal sort of intellectual, you know, thing that's happening, you know, you can't really see the horizon of it. You know, as far as like what you're trying to describe or what story, it can really just branch out to anywhere.
Sure. And it is heartbreaking when you miss those moments, because I felt that too. You know, you're not ready for it, and like a phrase, a line in a poem that may come to me, and I'm trying. I don't have my phone on me. I don't have pen and paper on me.
Right.
And I'm like, don't forget. You know, I sometimes I lose it. So I gotta always be prepared. I try to do that now. I try to always have something that I can take it down on and just be ready to capture it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, just the other day, like, I was driving, so I couldn't, like, write it. I was like, oh, my God. I knew I was going to forget it.
Right.
So I'm, like, hit my phone enough so it gets, like, audio recording.
Yeah.
Just, like, screaming into my phone and did, like, script writing for my films. And that always seems to be, like, to me, it was a different kind of difficult than the other art forms.
Right.
For me personally.
Sure.
Because you are really, your mind is the tool.
Right.
And you're just wielding these ideas right out of your mind. And there's very little, you know, like, a musician needs to learn his instrument as well as his songs. Mm-hmm. A painter needs to know how to paint before, and to put that idea there.
But a writer, it doesn't matter what your handwriting looks like.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you're typing it, you know. Exactly.
Yeah, like there's very little in between you and the art form.
It is, it's just you. It's
that's a good point. I never thought of that, really. That's a good point. And with the poetry, I was just thinking too. The other, so when it does come to me, when I do a phrase or a beginning of a sentence or a beginning of a poem, it comes to me, and I tap into it and I follow it and I capture it and I allow it to do what it's gonna do. Typically, I'll just go until it's done. Or I can't take breaks. Like with fiction or with nonfiction, I can put it down and come back to it. You know what I mean? But with a poem, in general, I can't put it down. Like I have to finish it in one moment, in one shot.
Gotcha.
And whether that be 10 minutes or an hour, or whatever, I have to keep going. Now, the caveat to that is if it's a longer poem describing where I just, it's too much to do in one shot. I want to, continue it and have it be perfect. In that sense, I will come back to it. That's the only time, though, in my life, actually, is this specific poem that, as I said, I'm like 14 or so pages into. It's the only time I've ever put a poem down and worked on it steadily over time. Okay. Most poems, so I should, 99% of the time, I have to do it in one shot. But if it's a longer thing, and it's going to be really, like, extensive, I just don't have the physical wherewithal to stay with it for 24 or 48 hours, like continue until it's done and marathon it. Right. So I do, but that, to be fair, that's one example where I'll put it down and I'll come back to it. Mm-hmm. But in general, I like to finish it when it comes to me. Because it feels like once that switch turns on, it's just going to go and you got to just get the whole thing down. Yeah. In general, that's what it feels like. So it's interesting, working on this longer poem. I've actually never done that before. Most of my poems, I guess they average 2 or 3 pages. They're not that, and some of them are shorter, but they're not that long. This is the only one that is more in depth and longer, I guess you could say. Okay. So it's been interesting to work on it because it has been different in several ways, but mainly in the way that I am coming back to it. But I guess when I come back to it, you do kind of, you tap back into it to an extent and you try to pick up where you left off. Right. Yeah. So, being that way, with this being an exception, with your other poetry, when you sit down to start to write it,
is it similar to your process of the nonfiction personal essay or the fiction, where do you have any kind of a plan going in? Do you leave your poems a little more open?
There's no plan with poetry. There's no plan to it. Again, actually, except the exception.
Right.
The long poem.
Mm-hmm.
There is a plan with that one. I have in mind where it's going.
Right.
That's funny that you bring that up, because this longer poem that I'm working on, I actually know the ending, which is something I've never experienced with poetry. I know the phrase, the last few lines, I know what they'll be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like halfway there, but I know what they'll be. So that's the exception. But in general, all the other poems, I do not know, because I'm just in the moment with them. Maybe that's why, because I'm just in the moment with them flowing. I don't have time to look ahead to the future.
Right.
I'm just in the moment, line by line by line, and then when I get there, I get there. And when the end is there, then there it is. But with this one, because there's been time in between,
right.
and for some reason the end came to me, and I know what the end is. So that is interesting. I actually hadn't thought about that until we're talking about it now. That's interesting. But in general, yes, I don't know where we're going with poems. Most of mine, I don't know. It's more just, just as it is. Just happens.
So I think my next question for you, it can really umbrella all arts.
Okay.
Like, I run into this with paintings. How do you? So when you go into that poem, freewheeling, as usual, with the exception of this exception,
right?
How do you know you're done?
Well, that's an interesting question. Usually, I mean, this is not. It's hard to break down that in a way that makes sense, or in a way that I can really be elaborate about. It's done when it feels like it's done. I mean, there will be I'll start to realize I'm nearing the end a few lines before the end. You start building to it. So I'll be going through the lines, through the stanzas, and I'll reach a point where I'm starting to feel the rhythm of the poem and where it is going, the subject, whatever it is. I'll feel the end approaching before I get there, and I'll know a few more lines, we're going to get there soon. I'll have an intuitive sense where we're almost there, we're almost to the end. So it'll start building towards an ending at a certain point, naturally. It's not something I really think about. It's just sort of, you get to a point, and it just you just become aware that the end is nigh. And then when it finally, and it builds exponentially as we get each line closer to the end, I'll have a stronger sense that the end is almost here. And then when I finally get there, it's a period, solid ending. I feel it. I feel the end. And I'm like, okay, there's never usually a sense of, oh, well, in poetry at least, there's never a sense of, I've never experienced the sense of, oh, well, should I end it here, or should I end it there? That's usually not the case. It's usually I feel the ending, and it's very pronounced. It's very obvious to me what the ending is. Now, reading back over, because not to say that there isn't a type of editing with poetry too afterward. Maybe there is. I'll reread it, and if some line or stanza stands out as really being like out of place, I could think about getting rid of it, that particular line. But that usually doesn't happen. It's usually I'm okay with it. I know a lot of poets will say it's like you do the process and then you go through and you kind of separate the wheat from the chaff, and you'll do the process. And if there's something is extraneous, you get rid of it, and it's not necessary. So sometimes that may happen. I tend to not do that. I tend to let it be. I don't like to, but if something is really glaring that doesn't belong, maybe I'll consider getting rid of it. But typically that's never happened with an ending. The ending is the ending, and it's usually not going to change. So.
Gotcha.
So I've never had a problem in poetry with just determining is this done or not. It usually I know it when it's done. I know it. I feel it for sure. And I don't know if it's different with visual art or or some ways similar, some ways different. I don't know.
Well, like I have the downfall where I like second guess my finished, whether I'm in the state of being finished or not. Because for me, like there's always, I can always see, even if I'm not there, I could always see that there's another avenue that I could possibly go down, where I could take this piece in this direction if I wanted to, or if I wanted to stop. And that's where I will at times like wrestle with, am I complete or not with this drawing or this collage. It's easier for me to declare a collage done than it would be to declare like an ink drawing done. So I feel like there's a collage boxes you in a little bit more, or a little bit more than a drawing would. There's just so many avenues, and for me it's just sometimes tough to decide if I leave it alone or not. And I've experienced both leaving it alone and being happy, or pushing forward and ruining it, and then having to then be presented with the challenge of, okay, I might have ruined this, but maybe not. Maybe not. And fight through it. And I would say maybe about 50% of the time of fighting through a screw up, I end up more happy with it.
Okay.
Like, just because now I've put myself in this position of having to figure it out, or all those hours of work were meaningless if I don't figure it out right now.
Right. Interesting.
So
interesting.
Yeah.
One can tinker too much sometimes.
Yes.
But I suppose sometimes tinkering is necessary at the same time. So it's a tough balance.
It is.
How do you know? How do you determine?
It's, as you say with your poetry, like it does become a feel thing. And I think the more one does, the better they hone that feel. To be able to say where they want to go with it.
And maybe that just goes to trusting yourself, getting used to trusting yourself as an artist and as a person. I think that's one thing that everybody should do more of, is trusting themselves. I've noticed that we tend to second guess, and that's normal to an extent. That's natural. I've been there. We've all been there. But I find like the more you just give yourself up to whatever that force is, and just trust, it'll usually take care of you, you know?
Yeah,
I think.
that's true.
I think at least.
Yeah.
But as you say, sometimes it is, and me too. Especially if I'm with my novel I'm working on, or an essay, there will be times where I really am stuck on a sentence or a phrase or a word, and I cannot get. It's very frustrating when you are. It's not right. There's something not right about it.
Yeah.
So that does happen. It's not always free flowing and easy. It shouldn't be. It's not meant to be easy.
Yeah.
You know. But again, I think you should, in general, really try to trust yourself, because you know inside. And as you say, the more you practice whatever you do, the more you get in the habit of creating whatever it is you're creating, the better you're going to get at trusting yourself and at listening, and knowing, feeling when something is done.
Yeah. And I feel like those moments of blockage in any form of art, there is a tremendous potential for growth in those moments. Because like, to use myself as the example, like if there's, just the other day, working on this drawing and there's just something not right, and like I know it, and I'm like, what is it? So that process of like artistically deconstructing the problem, I feel over time like serves you in the future, because it's super likely that you're gonna approach that problem again. You know, where you have like, okay, here's the problem. Like,
it's guaranteed that you'll face it again, for sure. Yeah.
And now, like, you've developed the tools to maybe deal with it a little bit better, or deal with it through a deeper channel of thought, because you've gone through it, or you've gone through something similar.
That's a good point. Yeah, you need to develop your own skill set at dealing with those moments, facing the challenge that any creative person faces, you know, and it's always going to be there. It's always going to show up. There's never going to be just, it's never all going to be perfect all the time.
Yeah, and I feel like if you're doing it right, you're right, it is going to keep showing up because we all are trying to continue to grow in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, like, you're going to experience those things.
Sure,
you know, so it's all cumulative.
Sure. It's part of the process, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
A lot of times, too, like, you know, whenever you reach one of those creative walls or whatever, it's almost like you can feel there's, like, this pressure kind of building against it, you know. It's like whenever there is, like, you got to put something down and go away. Whatever, you know, you're going through, when you come back to it, it's like, when you do break through, it's like, you know, you can make some other crazy... You start working on another piece, and it's like all this like artistic energy can kind of just like, you know, where it wasn't being used, it's kind of like it all just kind of pours out at once, and like, you know, you could just go off on this whole crazy.
Right. And that made me think of something when you said the pressure, because I feel that when I'm stuck at a blockage, or I don't know what's next, or having trouble with something, that pressure I feel also, it's like part of me. I know what's next. I want to keep going. I want to keep going because there's more to come. But I can't until I fix this thing. Right. And so for me, that's more the pressure I feel. It's like this thing, I want to keep going. I know what's coming next. Let's get going. Let's get on with it. But I can't until I fix this.
Yeah.
So it can be frustrating for sure.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I can't move on until I get this done. And maybe that's more, as I said, I tend to be kind of a perfectionist with things. Maybe some people will leave it and come back to it, and they'll just keep writing, and I'll deal with that later. I'm sure some people are like that, but maybe it's a mental thing. I can't get past it. Gotta fix it.
I can understand. I could see it from both sides, and with writing especially, because what you do in that sentence could then affect what comes next.
That's the thing. Yeah, because everything builds on what you've already done.
Right.
You know, it's like layers of a painting, I would imagine. Everything is all these layers, and you're adding to it, and it's all interacting with itself and growing organically. And if one part of it is off, it's like you gotta fix that. So yeah. I guess it's all this stuff. I guess is true in any artistic endeavor, whether it's music or visual art or fashion design or acting or writing or sculpting, whatever it is. I'm sure to an extent these problems are universal in any creative endeavor. So yeah, it's just part of it, part of creativity, I guess, is the struggle, you know, of getting there.
Moving matter around and stuff.
Sure.
And it does, you know, like that struggle does make that was a huge spike, by the way. That is what makes like the completion a little bit more like sweeter, is those handful of struggles we may have gone through.
Sure.
Throughout that.
Absolutely.
And, you know, that feeling of
accomplishment,
and
success and overcoming of the challenge.
Yeah.
Right. Definitely.
And in this, you know, like in the artistic world, that it's tangible.
Right.
You know, that accomplishment is tangible. It's writing or painting or a piece of music.
Sure. Here it is.
Exactly.
It exists.
Yeah.
You've brought something into the universe that wasn't
Out
there
of it,
before. Or maybe it was there, but you just tapped into it and translated it into our reality.
Yeah.
That's often the other thing I wonder about is, because sometimes when I'm writing something, and this is true of, I noticed it in my poetry and also in this fictional sci-fi fantasy book I'm working on. The story in the book, the story feels in some ways like it's already a complete story. And it's somewhere in the ether, and it feels like it's being downloaded through my brain and onto the page. It's like, and that's why I know the whole story already. It's like I'm tapped into it. I know what that story is.
Yeah.
It's there. It's something that exists. And to me, it's very real and very alive. And it's just a matter of translating it and doing the work and getting it done bit by bit. But as to where it comes from, I guess you could make the argument, I may call it the ether. Some people may say, oh, it's your subconscious creative mind. It's your own heart. Maybe they're both true. I don't know. But all I know is that in some ways the story feels like it exists somewhere. And I am simply a facilitator. It's coming. But if that is true, it certainly is coming through the lens of my perspective, my know-how, my style as a writer, my own lens, and it's being filtered through that lens.
Mm-hmm.
But the story exists somewhere. That's what it feels like when I'm writing it. I've noticed that. And that's true too with poetry to an extent. Not so much with the essay writing because it's all about my experiences.
Right.
But everything else, it's coming. It feels like it's coming from somewhere else. So it's an interesting philosophical question about art, the nature of art, and what makes us make art. Where does it come from? Within us, out in the universe, the cosmos, the Akashic records, where some combination of all these things.
Like it feels to me like some sort of a cocktail, and that depending on who an individual is and depending on their surroundings, those percentages, that mixture of the percentages of your subconscious, your conscious, the universe, your surroundings, everybody's percentage is probably a little bit different. But like it's definitely I think it has a lot to do with us that we know and us that we don't know. Right. I think there's constantly some like imaginary team deep down in your brain that's always going.
Sure. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
The way the brain works and the way we work and the nature of who we are and why creativity has always been such a part of our story. It's like we have to create things in the same way that we have to build things. Humans are builders and they're creators. This is what we do. And it's inherent to our nature. I think there is no society without art, for sure. Yeah. It's like just a mechanism that will not be ignored. It's like you have to listen to it. So I like that.
Inspired.
Yeah. I like that idea about it being a cocktail, though. You're probably right. That is what it feels like. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, because go ahead, Isaac.
Or I don't know, like nostalgia. Like you ever get, like you look at something, whatever art form it is, and you get this weird sort of, like you feel a piece like speaks like about you, or like it's like describing you.
Yeah, sure.
Or it's almost with like I don't know, whether it's old things you've seen as a child or something, but like with writing or whatever setting you have, if like you could almost picture yourself in that setting, does that kind of like remind you of some kind of dreamlike, like internal sort of realm that you just have to like get out because it's just so it like moves you in such a weird way?
Yeah, and like I think that reminds me of that concept going back to creating something that is universal so that everyone can tap into it. And it is a sense, sort of a type of nostalgia, perhaps, that feeling like you're tapping into that which is universal, that an artist like Van Gogh or Matisse got on canvas, and you're looking at it and it's absorbing you and it touches you and it reaches some part of you that you respond to because they tapped into something universal through their art, So absolutely.
And who's to say that there isn't some sort of a, invisible string that does somehow, like in a matter of speaking, an invisible string that attaches us all,
right?
And that is the reasoning behind why something 200, 300, 500 years old could speak to us right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Brilliant art is timeless.
Yeah.
It is not bound by space-time. It's amazing when you think about it. It's miraculous, and it's bizarre. And obviously, to some extent, there are trends in society where certain types of art become more in favor than others, and obviously it does go with the times to an extent, and some things are a product of their times, and some artists will, they'll say about them that they were ahead of their time, and during their life they were a miserable, poor, homeless, basically, and struggling and suffering, and people thought they were some sort of mad person, but now they're world-renowned. They're, Van Gogh is a perfect example,
Yeah.
So it's like, yes, absolutely, there is that amazing quality of timelessness in art, and at the same time there are these trends in art that go in and out of fashion. But I would think that the timeless art does remain once it is understood and recognized that it is such. It'll remain that way, and people will always be able to appreciate it.
Yeah,
for
Trends,
sure.
you know, it's just like shit patterning out, you know, and it's like with information moving so quick, it's like it's so easy to kind of like just see all these whatever trend it may be, they just kind of solidify and become a thing. But it's like even like the older, greater, you know, I don't know if you call it fine art, or just stuff from thousands of years ago, you know, and it's still, I don't know, kind of lost what I was saying, but it's like a
still
bigger
relevant.
pattern.
It's still relevant, and it's it is a bigger pattern.
It speaks to people internally.
Sure.
So than like just commercial. Yeah.
Absolutely. And yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was in terms of like in literature, you know, the artists who may have suffered in any form, but their work tends to be the ones that stick around. We will continue to read authors like Huxley for a long time, probably until humans are done. His book will always be somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know, will a book like will Twilight, just for a silly example,
Right.
will that hold up? Will that still be a thing in 20 years, in 30 years?
Maybe
I mean,
not.
it's barely a thing now anymore.
Right.
You know?
Sure. So maybe mediocrity naturally falls away out of favor. I like that idea.
Right, and I think like it's a macro thing, because let's say something mediocre is popular, like, you know, when you're living through it, it's like, oh, here it is again.
Sure.
You know?
Sure.
But in the huge picture, it's just a blip as all the greatness just continues.
Right,
Yeah.
right. It makes me think of Game of Thrones.
Okay.
No shade on anyone who still
Right.
loves the show, but a great, beautifully written first, 4 or 5 seasons or 6 seasons, and then the end was a complete train wreck. How many people are going to rewatch that show? I know I'm not.
Right.
I mean, I may love the beginning, but the entire piece as a whole, the series, is, in my opinion, a failure because they ruined the ending.
Right.
But I don't even think about it. I don't think about it. It was a huge thing, and I was on the hype train too.
Right.
I used to love that show. It was great. And there's some quality, obviously, for a lot of the show. It was great. But the ending is so sour and disappointing that, for me, I mean, if you like it, great, good for you. But I just found the ending to be kind of ruining the whole experience. I don't think about revisiting it, but something like Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Right.
I revisit wasn't once a year because it's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
You know?
So with Game of Thrones, just because I don't know too much about it, wasn't there, like, was the last season, so it went by the books, right?
Sure, but they ran out of books.
They ran out, and then that's when...
Because Mr. Martin hasn't finished them yet.
Okay.
Yeah, they kind of just did their own thing.
For the ending, they just did it.
Yeah, I mean, they may have consulted him, I don't know, but they did what they had to do, you know?
Yeah.
I think the first 5 books, right, are out, and so they had that to go on. And that's why the best part of the show is the first 4 seasons or so.
Yeah.
You know, that's because that's what they had that material to go off of. And maybe that goes more to the showrunners being not as talented as maybe they think they are, dealing with that. Because they had it's great. I read the first book. I never finished the others. I love the first book. It was great. I should probably finish reading the ones, the subsequent books. But, yeah, I mean, that's just one example. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of others.
Well, like, there's one show that's not as well known, but it was this show that played on HBO called Carnival.
Albert. I love Carnival so much.
So do I.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah. So, like, that was based off of books.
Okay.
And
I need to read those. I forgot that.
When they got, like, they do the 2 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And
what happened? Did it get canceled? It's a
bummer.
No,
they
just stopped.
Because I loved the show too, and I was like, okay, why? Like, I needed to know why it stopped.
Right.
Because the story wasn't over.
Sure.
Like, the story, even in the books, continues.
Sure.
But what had happened was HBO was spending a lot of money on, like, the setup. Like, the whole thing the production costs were super high.
Right.
And they wanted the writer, from what I'm doing my best to remember it, but they wanted the writer to like create a scaled back version so that HBO could cut production costs.
Oh, that's gross.
So they went to him. They're like, "Look, can you like just cut it back? Maybe write in a few less horses and make the crowd smaller. No explosions.
Oh no.
Less special effects.
Oh, HBO.
So
HBO.
the writer was like, "No, screw you. I'm not changing it."
Wow.
And then they presented him with the idea of finishing out the series in a film. They said, "All right, we don't have the budget, but we'll meet you halfway. And instead of doing a season of a show, let's just do like a 2-hour movie and let's just wrap this shit up."
Right.
And the author was like, "No, like I don't want to do that either."
Right.
So it pretty much like it was in stalemate, and like neither side would budge.
Wow.
And then it just was. Now it's pretty much just over.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
Well, good for the author for standing his ground. I mean, that's a big question. Is especially when you're dealing with Hollywood or the film industry, the TV world, making those concessions and dealing with them, and I guess you use both trains of thought. Like, it's a different form, so naturally you'll have to. There are certain things that you'll leave out or cut or will be different. Maybe you can make that it's okay to do that because it's the nature of it is different than a book. But at the same time, it is your work. It is your baby and all. So you want it to be what it is. You don't want it to be degraded in any way or short-handed or short-changed in any way. So it's a tough thing. That's why, even though for a while I did have an interest in screenwriting for a bit, I don't know, man. That's a whole industry that's, if you get involved in that, a lot of the times it seems like a real horror show. But, I've also always been a movie buff myself. I love film. And part of the thing is that it is kind of a big collaborative art project, which is great in a sense. You have writers and actors and musicians and photography and costume people, and it's a big group art project. It's great at its purest essence. Yeah. But of course, the problem is that it's become so corporatized, boardroom-like in the way of the thought process of the script and the producers being involved and companies having their market that they're targeting and. You have to have certain beats you have to hit, and you have to make it digestible for the audiences, and you have to do all of these things. You can't just go all out creatively. You sort of are stifled, and you have to. It's this obviously the whole kind of Disney Marvel thing is a good example of.
Perfect example.
I mean, they're fun, but they're at the same time it's like I don't know. But there are a few filmmakers I think that seem to have free reign for the most part. People like Quentin Tarantino come to mind, where he just seems to do whatever he wants and it's fine. Right. There are a few people in that, Scorsese and people, I think Christopher Nolan at this point to an extent. Some of these people really are able to just do their vision and not care about what anyone says. Right. But they're the minority, I think.
Yeah, they're the minority, and like they have made it in whatever way they have. They've made it to that privilege. Right. Scorsese is, through his films and his career, has, in a manner of speaking, like earned the right. To be for someone to say, do whatever you want. Because just his brand will do what the corporate people want. Right. Just his name on it will say, okay, like,
name is enough.
We know Scorsese, like we know people spend their money on it. So,
and maybe that's because they're not so much worried about the wider. Well, I was going to say the wider appeal, but there is wide. They know that there's going to be wide enough appeal with certain names, and they know that they're going to be Oscar contenders with certain names. Right. So they're okay with it, Right. But you're right. They build their careers over time, and they're allowed to do what they want, pretty much. But that's where. But I am torn about the film industry because, as I said, I've always loved movies, and they're very inspiring. Some of them, and I always love some of them. But at the same time, I certainly feel like there's a huge like propaganda empire and sort of cultural engineering going on with a lot of other films at the same time. And it's in the music industry too. The music industry in Hollywood is deep into some strange, shadowy stuff, it seems. It, and that exists. I can't pretend that doesn't exist. It does. And it's very strange.
It's a powerful medium,
It is, the audio-visual input, right?
Yeah, so the powers that be, it would only be expected, that they...
Right, that they would use it for particular... Right. Mm-hmm. Everything there definitely, there's some messaging that goes out, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
In all the content they produce. So then it's a matter of who, and why. Why is that the messaging? Who's deciding that, and why? Why are these same themes, storylines, archetypes over and over again? They don't seem to be necessarily the classical archetypes or themes that may emerge naturally. Mm-hmm. Somehow they feel artificial in some sense, or in some ways. I don't know. They feel off. A lot of the stuff in Hollywood just feels off. It's very strange.
Yeah. Well, here's like an interesting little side note that something I picked up on that to me is interesting and spooky about films, particularly Disney. So now, like, we know, like, Disney now owns some, if not all, of Marvel.
Sure.
So the next time either of you find yourself in a department store, and if you peruse the children's section, so up and down the aisles, and as you go up and down the aisles, if let's say there's 8 aisles of kids' toys, and they're all, the Barbie aisle, the car aisle, the fake gun aisle, the da-da-da-da aisle. Mm-hmm. If there are 8 aisles, 7 of those aisles are somehow a Disney product.
Right.
Be it Marvel or Mickey Mouse.
Yeah. Yeah.
The only thing that, in this weird way, that stands independent is like Barbie. It's like one of the only things. And
Thank God for Barbie.
Right. She's like the last independent.
Oh, no.
This is where
how did we get here? Barbie is the last stand. The last Barbie standing.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That's a good point.
But it's spooky, like, to realize it, and that it's all the same thing, like the same factory is piping everything to kids, and depending on whatever they're into, it's all going back to the same eye in the sky, in a manner of speaking.
Man, that's such a good point. It's like the homogenization of everything, the hegemony of culture. It's like everything is of the same nature. 9 times out of 10, this is the dominant culture. It's everywhere. It's hard to escape. It's reinforced, shoved down our throats, fed to us intravenously at this point, basically. And for independent artists, or it's very hard. With film, it's crazy. It's a bummer because there's so many talented artists alive today in all circles, in film and music and writing and art, but a lot of them are not given a voice or a platform. Thank God we have the internet and we have options now that we used to not have. That helps, but there's still this mainline culture that is so factory produced, certified by a board of people, and they approved for consumption by the masses. And it's really weird. It's really, really weird. And it certainly affects children, for one, all of us, adults too, but especially kids. Because kids are just more malleable than adults. So, and I guess that's always been the case, is that kids are exposed to things that maybe they shouldn't be, and you try to protect kids and whatever, and that's always been the case, but it's so invasive now because of the nature of our world. And again, there's benefits to the internet, incredible benefits, but there's also drawbacks. There's pros and cons to everything. And the internet that brings us freedom of information and expression and being able to put your work out there is the same internet that downloads this prepackaged culture into your home. And it's weird to balance that, to balance those things. Be aware, be very aware of what you're consuming, because it matters. It affects your mind. I've experienced it. I'm sure other people have too. It does affect your reality. It affects your perception.
Yeah.
And your ethos, even, I would say. It can. Some people are so tapped into that it affects their lifestyle almost.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Social engineering of sorts.
Yeah, I would say so.
Become very efficient.
I would say so. I mean, I guess that, again, you could argue that these things have always existed, that people have always been subject to the whims of the few who are in power. That's true to an extent, but again, I think it's different because of the nature of the mechanism is much more personal now. It's your phone attached to you everywhere, your internet in your home, the connectivity of everything, it makes it more in your face. Harder to escape it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, amazing technology, just kind of harnessed for not the most
Right.
altruistic purposes.
Right. And I guess that's the thing about technology, is that it can be used for any purpose that humans see fit, to help or to harm.
Yeah.
So, healthy awareness of all of these things is important.
Like, there's so many other things to experience.
Sure.
There's so many chances to take. And you may find something new in there.
Sure.
Whether it's even like down to like listening to music you may not have ever thought to listen to before.
Right,
Like, it could
definitely.
be that simple.
Yeah.
Something that simple can just kick open doors in your mind.
And it is sort of like exponential, like one thing leads to the other. Once you take the first step of freeing your mind from some of that mainline culture, it's gonna open more doors, and then more doors and more doors, and you're gonna be introduced to more things that are interesting and vibrant and just higher quality content, whatever that content is, whatever that media is that you're consuming. It's very important. Because there's so much great stuff out there that people aren't exposed to, because they just don't know about it, because they're stuck, as you say, in this cycle of consuming the same type of product, the same type of information, media, whatever it is. They're stuck in it.
Shitty job, shitty food, shitty TV,
Yeah, it has an effect on you.
Over and over.
You want to see people explore more. And I want that for myself too. I always want to try to explore new horizons, things I haven't experienced before in the way of culture and art. But yeah, it's so hard right now. And just again, like, social media doesn't help, because that's like a whole other thing where people promote certain ideas and things, and they get promoted, and they're wrapped up in it. So yeah, it's tough. It's tough. We're in a weird situation. We're in a really weird situation. And I think a lot of people seem to feel frustrated by it. That's one thing I've noticed, is that more and more people are sort of aware that there's this weird culture being fed to us. Like, why?
Yeah.
And people are asking, like, why? What is this? And people that a few years ago maybe weren't savvy to that, now I can have the conversation with them. And they're like, yeah, I get it now. I see it. It's weird.
This is pretty weird.
It's weird. Where did this come from? And I do think that there are some people who would argue that it is organic, and that it's not something fed to us. It's just a product of our culture evolving. And I mean, I understand that point of view to a degree, but I just don't agree with it. I do. It just feels like there's some outside force manipulating culture. That's what it feels like. So
yeah, it's hard to know if it's just us doing this to ourselves, or if there's something else with the streams. But
yeah,
it does seem more like the whole nobility behavior, whatever horrible forces that are kind of would be overlording this whole thing we're living on. It's it probably stems from very sort of lower brain activity, reptilian sort of.
Yeah, it seems like there's that. Yeah, and it's it's very base, and it's very degrading in some ways. Like, the over-sexualization of everything in the music industry and in Hollywood is a good example.
Yes.
Taking something that's really ancient and beautiful and sacred, and the reason our species exists, and turning it into the most base, shallow shadow of what it is. That's another thing that I find really disturbing too, and I think that causes a lot of damage to people's psychology, their behavior, the way they act in their relationships, the way, you know, we've sort of seemed to have, some people sort of seem to have lost a basic respect for one another, where some people treat each other pretty poorly, it seems. And some of that seems reinforced by some of what we see in certain movies, TV, for example.
Yeah.
So that's another...
And man, you look like the little 2-year-olds too. They already got like the full-on tablet. It's like three times as big as their head.
Oh, man.
It's like, what's this link?
It's so disturbing.
Check it out.
Yeah.
It's so disturbing. I hate it. I hate it.
It's kind of
Little kids with electronics weirds me out. I know some parents will be like, hey, it's convenient. It's fine.
You know, have it raise my child.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair, whatever. You know, no judgment, I guess.
But I mean, there it is. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird.
It's crazy.
Yeah, like it's sort of like, you know, starting them. You could say like starting them young.
Sure.
Like it's like, let's just, you know, if we want to go there, like let's just program them the younger and younger, and we'll make a tablet that looks like Pikachu.
Yeah.
And then the kid's gonna want it. So
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, it really does. Like seeing it, especially in like the last year and everything, it's like just how the whole education system has been restructured to kind of get this whole new generation to be very autonomous, like capable drones almost, to just be able to pilot like a terminal of sorts. But I mean, at the same time, you know, it's like we were thinking it could just, the whole Rona thing, how it could just be, there's like a renaissance sort of brewing, you know, so that we're all these artistic minds are kind of trapped in our own heads and our houses, nowhere to really go or do. It's like it could explode maybe. Who knows, next year could be a lot better or something.
It's fascinating the past year, how that's a good point, like how that's affected everyone. Being a little more time to yourself. It's been obviously pretty tough on a lot of people. You could say that perhaps though there's the potential there to, as you say, bring out certain good creative things in us. Force us to look within and you know, make some good out of a bad situation. But yeah, the other thing that occurs to me is the separation, though. The other negative thing, the separation. You know, people like, we're all on our phones, or kids on tablets, and it's like they're separated from the tactile world around them. That I think is pretty harmful. I don't know. I mean, you need to be able to interact with your world. Perhaps some people would say, well, the digital landscape is the dominant world of the future. They are interacting with their world. It's the digital world. But, yeah, that's a whole other rabbit hole. But I think it's super important to remain grounded and connected to that which is around you, rather than, like, diving headfirst into a digital landscape.
Deeper than the phone or the computer, like we're walking, like we already it.
Right.
You know, we don't need the attachments.
Right,
you know?
right. That is such a good point. I mean, yeah, there's an endless reservoir of creativity and beauty and ideas within us that we should be tapping into as much as we can. And even if you're not, like, quote unquote, a creative person, there's still so much richness within every human being. It doesn't matter if you're you consider yourself an artist or not. It's still there. There's something there. And you're right. Why tap into what your phone is feeding you? Why not tap into what is within yourself and feed yourself the spirit that's within you, the knowledge that's within you, the wisdom that's within you? If you're going to dive into any world that's unseen or intangible, right? Why not have it be yourself? You know, know thyself. It's super important. You gotta know yourself. And there's endless richness there. Human beings are full of complex, beautiful things. And it's like, the more you waste your time, well, maybe some people wouldn't consider it wasting, but the more you spend your time on the phone, on the internet, absorbing whatever, scrolling through social media or absorbing different things, you know, why are you allowing... That's a choice. You have to realize that that's a choice. You're choosing to fill your head with certain things. And obviously, I'm not saying that you should be like a hermit or a monk living separate from the world around you. I mean, it's good to stay up on what's happening in the world, certainly, but you don't have to drown in it. You know, you can take the time, even 15 minutes a day, and just sit and be quiet and just think and just feel who you are and look within yourself. It's not empty in there.
Yeah.
We're not, I mean, it's like this, we're not like empty vessels waiting to be filled by or whatever outside forces. I mean, we're influenced by things, and, certain art or music or literature inspires us and moves us. But there's so much in us that we need to express. We should strive to share with the world in whatever way is good for you. That's the other thing I think that we need to remember is, like, we each have a piece of the puzzle, I think, We each have a wisdom that no one else has. So share it. Whatever your thing is, share it. And think about it and listen to yourself. And, consider your own heart and mind. Don't bend over backwards for outside forces in culture or some authority figure or some political movement or any one thing. Like, listen to yourself, you know, and talk to other normal people. I say normal. We're surrounded by these talking heads and celebrities and politicians who they're these weird. They feel like are just these. I don't want to say they're not human. They're human, but they're so odd. They're like in another world.
I feel like they've been probably at some point, whether it's like the world of Hollywood or the music industry or politics. Like, I feel as though these people, just by going through the process, let's assume that everybody started with good intentions. And I feel like just the process of getting there can dehumanize you in one way or another. You want to be the pop star.
Yep. I mean, there's so many, like, weird tales of what people went through as, like, for example, child actors in the industry. Yeah. People like Macaulay Culkin and Elijah Wood and all the other, Corey Haim and whatever, all these people. It's crazy. It's weird. And they are corrupted and they're damaged and abused, a lot of them. And so that's one thing. And then, all the people who, as you say, maybe in Hollywood or in want to get in the arts, in the music industry, or if they're in politics in D.C., they may have the best intentions. They may go in there, but the nature of the nature of the institution does corrupt, I think. It's almost, you gotta really be like a Zen warrior monk to get through Washington, D.C. After a 50-year career and still be pure of intent. It's borderline impossible, I would say. Right. So it's hard when we're living in a system that is so broken and so ripe for corruption. I mean, how do you? It's like you have to. I mean, in Washington, you have to wheel and deal. You have to wheel and deal. You have to be part of it.
All the suits, the congressmen, they should just have like their sponsor kind of.
Yeah, like NASCAR jackets.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. They should. They're all bought and paid for. It's really sad, and I wanna not be cynical, but I am. I've gotten very cynical about the systems of our nation and world.
I mean, it's a sad thing.
I would love to believe that the government has our best intentions for us. I would love to believe that Hollywood and the music industry are just artists sharing beauty with the world, but that's not always the case. There's just a lot of weird shadow stuff happening, and I think people are aware of it though, especially now. Because I feel like we exist now in a place where it's harder to keep things secret. Maybe that's part of the technology that we have. Things are easily recorded and, people get caught now more, I think. People don't get... But then again, at the same time, there does seem to be a class of people that's beyond the law. They're so wealthy and powerful that they can't be touched. And that's a problem too. Right. How do you deal with that? I don't know. How does one person deal with such things? Yeah. It's a very tough situation. Yeah. I mean, I'm not necessarily convinced that we're like about to do fall of the Roman Empire stuff, but I wouldn't count it out.
Yeah, like it definitely, and I'm not like super in touch with much in the world of like politics and things, but there's a change in the air, and I don't know what, I don't know good or bad, but it definitely feels like I don't think we can continue down this track the same way for much longer.
No, we're not.
You know,
I don't think we're gonna. There is change.
It's definitely front row seats, man, being on Earth right now.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
So many different ways this could go.
Yeah, it's a fascinating time to be alive. But yeah, change is the one constant, right, in the universe. Humanity has always changed and evolved. Nothing remains static. Empires rise and fall, you know. Borders of countries change. People change. And yeah, we're in the midst of a more tumultuous period, it feels like. More than perhaps you would say usual. But we're always growing and changing. It's just, it seems like there are periods where it's slow, steady change and evolution. And then there are other periods where it's all at once, a giant shakeup happens. And it feels like we're in the midst of that right now. It's just a matter of what direction we want to shake up into. You know, where do we want to go? That's something we have to think about. Because we could go to really beautiful, interesting places. Or we could go to some serious, dark, restrictive places. So I would just say that, you know, people need to really be aware of what they acquiesce to, what they agree to in their lives, and what they want to build and what they want to experience. And, you know, there's a lot of players on the world stage, all with their own agendas, and corporations certainly have become key players, which is pretty twisted and strange. The sort of corporatocracy thing is scary. That's why I always say, like, small communities are really important. Staying local, having small, local, self-sufficient communities where
growing their own food.
Their own food, their own energy, their own shared
currency.
Ethos or shared sense of community. That is more important than ever. Yeah. I mean, because there's if anything does happen with the system eating itself and caving in on itself, you want to be able to sustain yourself and your friends and family.
That's probably it'll probably head there pretty quick without the advent of whatever it would be, you know, modern, you know, electricity, the grid, you know, if it was all to just go away, it's really it's like a sci-fi writer's.
Well, all it would take is a big enough solar flare, right?
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
And then watch out.
That would win the game.
Know? Yeah. Then we're done for. We're going back to something else. So yeah, I say just be prepared. You know, I'm an optimist. First of all, I am. By my nature, I know I am concerned with all this crazy stuff.
Right.
But I try to always be optimistic. And at the end of the day, I actually do genuinely feel like we're gonna be all right. I feel like we're gonna come through whatever challenges, and we're going to grow, and we're going to survive. The human race is good at surviving things.
Yeah.
They really are. We're still here. People should remember that each and every one of us are here because our ancestors were survivors, you know?
Yeah.
Remember that. Like, you're capable of a lot. People are capable of dealing with more than they realize that they are. You know, we're strong beings, and we're resilient. You know, we're very resilient. I have to remember that. But yeah, I mean, it's hard, like, to think about if there is a solution to all the corruption and all the weird stuff. You know, I guess, as I said, the best bet to my mind, or one of the best bets, is just to be independent in how you live and how you think. You know, be self-sufficient as much as you can. Be close to your family and your neighbors and your friends. You know.
Yeah.
That's important, I think. So.
Yeah, no, I think so too.
Just no standing in the way of it, you know, just roll right over it. Just staying away is the biggest thing, probably.
Yeah.
Further from whatever might be said.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get wrapped up in it, you gotta be careful, you know. If you're, and I mean, God bless them, people who are really politically active and they're trying to do what they think is right, and they're out there protesting, or they're writing letters to their Congress people and whatever the thing, good for them. That's great. I just, I haven't done that yet in my life. Maybe I should be more active. Some people think that's really important. Maybe that's something I'll explore in the future, but part of me tries to avoid it,
Right.
Because it's a strange thing to get involved in too heavily. People are very convinced that their side has the answer.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I've realized. Nobody seems, well, not nobody, but some people don't want to have a conversation anymore.
No.
Their attitude is...
It's no longer the norm.
The time for conversation is over. It's my way or the highway.
Yeah.
To a lot of people, that's the attitude. And I've certainly lost friends because of opinions shared.
Right.
That maybe they found distasteful, even though they're just relatively moderate views.
Right.
It's not good enough.
Yeah, and that, there was a time, even in our lives, where people were more apt to be able to not agree.
Right.
And people were more willing to coexist as, you thought this, I thought this.
And that's okay.
Right, exactly.
And when you're able to, butt heads with each other and, acknowledge, whatever differences, nothing that, no better or worse, but, when you can openly, see that in whatever, maybe two people, two individuals, two
right.
whole groups of people, it's then, you've reached that deeper understanding and, you can, I don't know, bond, that.
And I feel like when you approach it in that my way or highway, I think that however many sides there are, 2, 3, 4, however many, each side will only dig their heels in deeper.
Mm-hmm.
If everyone is of the mindset of my way or nothing.
Sure.
And then it's going to be harder and harder and harder for any progress to be made.
Mm-hmm.
If we're just going to automatically shut each other down.
Yeah, we've forgotten how to agree to disagree.
Yeah.
People don't think that's acceptable anymore. There are people who have the attitude, it is not acceptable to agree to disagree. You have to be fully on board with my opinion, or I'm going to excise you from my life like a pus-filled tumor.
Yeah.
It's really weird. And obviously, you see it more on social media. I don't see it as often. I mean, it's creeping into the day-to-day in small ways, I think. Mm-hmm. But it's obviously more prevalent on social media, which is a whole other reality where people feel like they can resort to personal attacks. And
it just feels like a dumping ground for all this subconscious
seriously
bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know why I'm actually in the midst of a 2-week break from social media.
Oh, no.
It's been great. It's been great. I mean, I miss the memes, but other than that, it's been great.
Right.
I mean, people go all out. They're really serious.
They are.
They're really serious.
So good. It's great.
Oh, good for you. I mean, that's great. It's, whatever. I don't want to judge too hard, but it's going to affect your mind and soul after a while.
Yeah.
You just hear, heavy fucking breathing.
Oh, yeah.
Clacking keyboards.
Yeah, the keyboard warrior.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Sure. Man, I don't know. And it's weird to think, in the small ways that it is creeping into the day-to-day. I wonder if that's going to continue, are we going to allow it to make our daily interactions with people in the physical world as hostile as they are in the social media world? I hope not, but that freaks me out. I hope not. I hope we can, because by and large, in the day-to-day, most people I interact with are pretty lovely. I'm fine with them. They're not all hyped up. They're, occasionally, especially now, you see it more often than you did. There are people who are dealing with stuff and they're uptight or they're not feeling great, and they show it more and they're a little more apt to show it. But in general, it's always, most people are still pretty, they're just normal human beings living in a society, dealing with each other, interacting with, not being disrespectful of each other. It's that separation on the screen that gives people the right, they feel like they have the right to be really, really hurtful
Right.
and disrespectful,
Yeah.
which is really not warranted. I mean, it's like,
There's some cowardly aspect to it too. The fact that
you're hidden behind the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I also
There's no threat of getting punched out, you know. Right,
Yes.
that's the thing.
But I also feel like there's that element of it, and there's also an element of either underlying, whether you feel it or not. I think there's an element of compassion that comes across when you're dealing with someone face to face, one on one.
Right.
Because whatever you do, you are getting that person's reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something in us, I feel like there's a good part of us that doesn't want to hurt someone.
We're empathetic beings.
Yeah.
We're social beings. We are. I think nature and biology strives for balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
For symbiosis, for coevolution, and we don't want things to be chaotic and violent. That happens sometimes, but we prefer stability because it's better for the growth of our species. And we are empathetic. And when you're with someone, sharing a space with someone, you know, as you said, seeing their face, reading their face, feeling their energy, interacting with them, you can't. You want to be. I mean, they're another human. You can't deny their humanity in the same way that you can when you're separated by the internet through a screen. You know. So that's a huge point, I think, to realize. That, you know, just because we're separated by the screen doesn't give us the right to tread all over people.
Mm-hmm.
You know. I mean, maybe I've been guilty of it once or twice, but I try not be. I try to be respectful. I really do.
Yeah.
I mean, people would go off on my posts sometimes. I try to like just be like moderator sometimes, or if I'm responding, I try to keep it on point and not. I'm not gonna like start attacking the person.
Right.
You know, if we're I actually encourage open discussion about things. I love that we can. I want to be able to talk about ideas.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be able to do that. So I try to always be aware of that, be cognizant of that.
Yeah.
But some people are just.
They're
showing
you.
You
said something
they don't want to know.
They don't like it.
It's scary.
Yeah.
It's scary. But I don't know what the future holds then in regards to that. I really don't. Like, where do you go from there? You know, what's the?
Not far.
Where does that end? Where does that road end? You know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird. I can't even imagine. I can't. Other than it pouring into our lives more and affecting our day-to-day life.
Right.
That's my worry.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not too worried about it because, as I said, most people are still. You know, I really enjoy the company. You know, from dealing with someone in real life, I like most people. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be encouraged. Just like real time space connection with people, like, you know, sharing some space or some ideas, because it is so much harder now.
I know, right?
I
know. It's so important, especially now that people are more separated.
Yeah.
It's like in so many ways, everyone is being like separated from each other in a lot of different ways, physically, mentally, spiritually, and that separation is really unfortunate.
Yeah, it makes us weak.
Yeah, we need people are happier in groups and they're stronger when they have that connection is really important. So we're in a situation now where the connection is readily available online, but the problem is that the online connection tends to lead us to those argumentative, negative places.
Yeah.
So it's a conundrum a little bit.
And the other thing is, it's very difficult for context and cadence to come across in a typed out response to somebody.
Sure.
And I think that a lot of people are presupposed to automatically have a knee-jerk reaction to a disagreement online because you're not in front of the person and your tone is not coming across.
Right.
The other person who may already be irritated with you is now injecting what they think your tone is.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think part of it may be connected to the instant gratification element of our society. And I think that's connected to the knee-jerk reaction thing. Everything is instantaneous now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's this thing about not having the patience to enjoy something properly. It has to be instant right now. And I think that translates also to our reactions to things that we have problems with, maybe. We're trained to have a knee-jerk reaction rather than sitting with it, thinking about it. It's this instantaneous thing, which, again, is probably a combination of the nature of our technology and also just the speed at which media is presented to us. Everything is instant. So you're going to be able to get that, order an Amazon package and have it delivered to your door the next day or 2 days later. Or you're going to be able to just go get fast food and it's right there. Or whatever it is. Have a movie instantly on your computer. There it is. Yeah. Everything is instant. So I do see that there is maybe a connection between that and that instant gratification and also instant knee-jerk reactions. Rather than being patient, thinking, listening, actually listening to what someone's saying,
right,
and not be offended by their opinion, because guess what? Maybe they're just expressing their opinion. They're not trying to hurt you personally. It's just their opinion. Right. So I think we need to slow down as well, because everything is like in hyper speed. Yeah. And when you go fast, you make mistakes. When you're playing a chess game and you move too quickly, you make mistakes. You need time to think and to see and to listen and to absorb properly, process the information. But our world has become sound bites, headlines, very quick bits of information, very fast. Yeah. You know, and that certainly affects the way we deal with problems, the way we face problems, and the way we deal with each other. So it's pretty interesting.
Well, there you have it, folks. Noah Koep Wilson, what a great conversation. It was so much fun having him on the show. Noah is going to be back with a whole lot more content. We're going to get him back on the show very soon, I'm hoping. It was also good to have Isaac back on the show. Don't forget, it's been an hour and a half since I told you. Don't forget, Isaac's new music video. Go on YouTube under Old King Moon. You'll find it there. It's a fantastic video with great cinematography and great music, all done by Isaac himself. You could find this podcast and a whole lot more on all major podcast platforms. What does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. Just between you and I, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, the podcast app, and YouTube with a little bit of video to make things a little bit easier to swallow. It's like peanut butter and dog pills. Just video, little video action, something to look at, makes the whole podcast go down a little bit easier. And why not? Why not make things go down a little bit easier? With that all said, I want to thank Noah again for being on the show. It was great. Thank Isaac for coming on the show. And thank you for listening. Warm weather's here. Go out, enjoy yourself, breathe some air, take care of yourself, and take care of somebody else. Get yourself hit with some of that vitamin D.